What is going on, YouTube? It's Joe here, and I have some new content for everyone. I have joined the WPF for their Season 10 draft. This is a really large Discord server, over 1,000 members, and it's a really good community, pretty competitive draft league. So I was actually in it for Season 9. I won their Defense Division, their lowest division, and I have been promoted to the Attack Division, the second highest of 4 divisions for their main sort of just normal draft format. So alongside NPBA videos, I'm going to be adding WPF to those. Hopefully I have enough time to do both. So I thought I'd just make a quick video. Probably will be 40 minutes long because that's how my videos end up going. But just a little video to break down my team, go through my draft process a bit, and just introduce the new format, I guess. So to start off, again, this is a National Dex draft. There's 16 teams, pretty standard. It is not a legacy format. So Hidden Power, Return, Pursuit, those are all banned. Otherwise, 115 points, 9 to 11 Pokemon. That's pretty standard, I would say. And that's pretty much it for the rules. So I had picked 10, and this season of WPF is a little different than most because they allowed a lot of banned Pokemon to be legal. Stuff like Ash Greninja, Darkrai, Naganadel, Zamazenta Crowned, Mega Alakazam, a few others. I picked one of them I didn't mention yet. And I had picked 10, so I knew I would likely get one of the new Pokemon because a couple other things like Dragapult were going to be picked no matter what. But unfortunately, when it got to me, there were no Pokemon left that were unbanned except for one. And I pretty much had the option between this Pokemon and Urshifu Dark for 19 points. And I decided I want to try something new. I've actually never used Urshifu either, but I decided to go with Libero Cinderace. So the complex ban for this is going to be no U-turn. That's actually a pretty big hindrance. However, Libero Cinderace can do a ton of damage, gives me a great speed tier to start off my draft with 119, and a very respectable 116 attack. It has Pyro Ball as its signature move with 120 base power, 90 accuracy. That's going to hit very hard. Sorry, had a little hiccup there. Otherwise, it gets pretty good coverage moves. Iron Head, Gunk Shot, Sucker Punch, High Jump Kick are all moves that it can run pretty reliably. It also gets Acrobatics for the occasional maybe matchup that needs Acrobatics. Otherwise, it gets Bulk Up for setup, and it gets its signature other move, Court Change, which is a very useful move. Since this can't run U-turn, which you always run U-turn on Cinderace, since it can't run it, that opens up a slot, which will be sometimes a coverage move, but since the coverage isn't super big, you oftentimes don't need to run all 4 moves as coverage. And a lot of times you won't want something like Sucker Punch, which like isn't that strong, stuff like that. So the 4th move a lot of times can be Court Change, which allows you to, if you don't know, switch the hazards on each side of the field. So this doubles as hazard removal, but mainly this is going to be kind of a late game cleaner. It can also just be a pivot if I want it to be, because you don't have to run Libero, you can run Blaze, and if you run Blaze you're allowed to use U-turn. So there will be some matchups that running U-turn on Cinderace is actually preferred. But most of the time we're going to want to get off those stab gunk shots, which are going to be hitting extremely hard. Stab Sucker Punch if they have some fast Pokemon or some Scarfers. High Jump Kick is absurdly powerful on Cinderace. Stab High Jump Kick just does so much damage. It's actually its strongest move at 130 base power. So I'm excited to use this. It's a little awkward to use without U-turn, I will admit. At the time I got a little excited. I was like, I want to use the unban. I maybe should have picked something else, but I went with this, and I'm just going to keep going with it, and that's what I wanted to build my draft around. So I get a couple other things that support this Cinderace, but I was looking at what was like being drafted and all of the new unbans, all of the like really strong Pokemon, and I noticed a theme was that a lot of them were really weak to Fairy. You got like the obvious Dragapult, Urshifu, but now we have Ash Greninja, we have Darkrai, to some extent Naganadel, obviously that's also a poison type. There's a couple others. I can't remember. There's one other I was thinking of. Oh, Kyurem Black is also very weak to Fairy. So I was seeing like most of these very strong Pokemon are very weak to Fairy, and then you also have like Mega Gallade and just Dark types in general being weak to Fairy. So I wanted to get a good Fairy type, and I went with the obvious Clefable for 16 points. This is Clefable. If you haven't used one before or faced one before, well, you'll see what it does here. Very bulky Pokemon, has respectable special attack, can fire off pretty strong Moonblasts. Two great abilities with Unaware and Magic Guard, and also Cute Charm is like not terrible. But it gets Stealth Rocks, it gets Teleport, it gets big coverage, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Flamethrower, Calm Mind, Psyshock. You can run Thunder Wave, Toxic obviously, Soft Boiled, and Wish. Only downside of this is you can't run Soft Boiled and Teleport on the same set because they're incompatible with each other. There's no way to get them on the same Clefable. That's pretty unfortunate, but we'll live with that. Overall, this provides so much utility. It's a pivot, it's a rock setter, it can be a setup Pokemon with Calm Mind. I think it gets Storm Powder. I'm not sure if it gets Storm Power, but it might. Either way, it's my Fairy type for the draft, and I think securing a strong Fairy can be super helpful early on, since there's just so many offensive Pokemon, Dragons, Darks, some fighting types, that Fairy types will just kind of make not really that viable in the matchup, and especially when you have something like Clefable, it being able to stop them with its both defensive and offensive pressure. I just felt this was a really strong pick, and it also pairs fairly well with my next pick, which is Spectrier. So most people know what Spectrier does. It's pretty straightforward. Very weak to dark types, which Clefable can just destroy instantly, pretty much with Moonblast. Cinderace with High Jump Kick also handles them quite well, and Cinderace with High Jump Kick also handles the normal types that Spectrier will struggle with. So Cinderace Spectrier actually a pretty good pairing, since you can kind of consider Cinderace to be a fighting type when you run High Jump Kick. Obviously, if the opponent has Ghost types, a little riskier, but you can also, you can just attack them with other moves until they're gone. Spectrier, though, 145 special attack. That's a monstrous stat with 130 speed. This is going to top out our speed tiers for the draft, and topping out at 130 is amazing. There's so many things that they just won't be able to outspeed you, or they'll be forced to run Scarfs on a lot of things, or else they'll just lose to Spectrier when they have like 4 Pokemon left. There will be times when like you clean out their Dark type, their Normal type if they have it, maybe like a really bulky thing like I don't know, anything with a high special defense stat, and they have like 3 or 4 things left, that some of them are at like maybe 60% health from random chip damage, and Spectrier can just come in, Nasty Claw at once, maybe not even once, and 1-hit KO everything, get the Grimnay rolling, and now your special attack stats in like the 600s, 800s, whatever, and you can win the game from there. So I was really excited to get Spectrier, mainly because of the speed, and also the fact that it's 14 points. I think that's a steal. I think it should be 15, so I guess it's not a big steal, but getting it one point cheaper than where I value it is pretty nice. I've also never really used it before. I used it once early on in my draft league career. I picked it up late as a free agent. I brought it to like 1 battle. It didn't do anything. That's whatever. So this is my first time really using it. But it's not just the Shadow Ball user. It gets Dark Pulse. You don't really ever need that. But it also gets Nasty Plot. You can run Substitute Disable. You can run Will-O-Wisp Hex, so it has a couple sets. I think Will-O-Wisp is really nice on it, as well as Disable. And you can run Double Kick for stuff like Obstagoon if you need it. But doesn't get much coverage outside of that. But that's okay, because it's so strong and so fast. You just have to get rid of its threats, and it pretty much wins the game right there. So, super excited for Spectrier. Hoping to get a lot of kills with it. This is a contender for kill leader this year. This season, I should say. Moving on. I was thinking where I wanted to go with my team, and I actually had no idea. And I knew I needed some hazard removal, so I went with a little more unorthodox of a hazard remover in Excadrill. So you can probably guess what my next pick is going to be, so I'll just tell you that it's Tyranitar. I decided that Excadrill gives me a little bit of a lower speed tier, but still an important one around the 90 range at 88. Does a ton of damage. It's a steel type and a ground type to absorb electric moves. Absorb those poison moves for Clefable. It actually pairs quite well with Clefable. Though it does build up a bit of a ground and water weakness when paired with Cinderace, which is not helped by Tyranitar, but of course we patch that up later. Sand Rush in the sand, this is going to outspeed basically everything, and very little lives Earthquake from like a Swords Dance Excadrill or even just like a Life Orb Excadrill. It's pretty hard to live neutral Earthquakes if you're not bulky enough after like Stealth Rocks and stuff like that. It also gets Rapid Spin, which now boosts speed, which is really nice because +1 Excadrill outspeeds almost everything. Basically besides other Scarfers and like Regieleki, and I don't know if it outspeeds base 150s, but it outspeeds a lot. Mold Breaker is really nice to beat Rotoms because it gets past Levitate, and it has pretty good coverage with Edgequake. Stone Edge and Earthquake has very little Pokemon that resist it. And it's another rock setter if I really want to run rocks on it, which I've done in the past. Back when I played competitive Pokemon in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, I would always use Excadrill as a rock setter because it's actually kind of bulky. That 110 HP is pretty strong. You can run it as a bulky set. I wouldn't recommend it. You probably want to just run Swords Dance in 3 attacks, or like Swords Dance and Rapid Spin in 2 attacks, or maybe Rapid Spin in 3 attacks. But rocks can be definitely run on it some weeks. Probably my least common rock setter, but I could see bringing it maybe 2 times this season. So Excadrill, I think it'll do a lot. Next up, of course, Tyranitar is coming. This is going to be a little bit more of a defensive role. Obviously, Tyranitar is incredibly bulky with 100 HP, 110 defense, 100 Spadef, with a very good 134 attack and a respectable 95 special attack that's actually equal to Clefable's special attack. So don't sleep on special Tyranitar. Tyranitar actually gets incredibly good coverage with, I think it gets Ice Beam and Fire Punch and Thunder Punch. It gets, of course, Stone Edge, Earthquake, Dark Pulse, Crunch. I want to say it gets Foul Play as well. Yeah, it does. And then, of course, you got Stealth Rocks. I think it gets Thunder Wave. Of course, Toxic is good. So this has a lot of different roles it can fill. You got Dragon Dance as well. It can run Choice Scarf. It can run Assault Vest, Choice Band, Leftovers, Smooth Rock, just to set the sand for Excadrill. So there's a lot of different roles Tyranitar can fill. I don't have to just bring it with Excadrill. The only downside is it has a ton of weaknesses. Rock Dark is a pretty good offensive typing. It is one of the worst defensive typings in the game. But the bug weakness is covered. All other Pokemon resist bugs so far. The rock weakness is not a weakness. I meant to say the ground weakness is real. It's bad. I'm going to patch it up on the next 2 picks, or next few picks, I should say. The water weakness isn't really a weakness for Tyranitar. Like, yeah, it doesn't like Scald, but its special defense is so high that it's not always going to be a big deal. Like, there's not that many offensive waters. It's more like taking Scald from a bulky water, which it can do. It doesn't really want to stay in, but depends on the matchup. You might want to throw off a Toxic or a Stealth Rocks before switching out. So I think Tyranitar is going to be a nice pairing for Excadrill. We'll see how it works out this season. I've never drafted Sand before, and this isn't really a Sand team. It just has 2 Sand Pokemon on it. But that's fine. I don't think you need to draft your whole team around weather. Having just that little core of 2, maybe 3 Pokemon is totally fine, in my opinion. It lets you be a little more creative with your teams, especially when you have like Excadrill, Tyranitar. Like if you draft like Pelipper, Pelipper's fine. If you draft like Politoed for a rain team, like you're not really bringing Politoed unless you want to run rain. Even somewhat true for Pelipper. Obviously it's a defogger, so it has a little more utility. But like Tyranitar is totally fine just as a normal Pokemon. Like it doesn't have to be on a sand team. Excadrill, same thing. It's decently fast. It has Rapid Spin to make it actually fast. Has insane attack. Has Stealth Rocks, and you know, one does not have to come with the other. But when they both come, it is quite nice. So all my picks have been pretty high on the points so far. I haven't really dipped down into the low tiers yet, so I went for a little bit of a cheaper option next, and I decided to go for Rotom-Mow. So I had this mon on my radar since like pick 4. It is extremely synergistic with this team. It's how I beat bulky waters actually. Maybe it's not the best answer for them, but it is a pretty good answer for them. Very bulky Pokemon, very high defenses, and decent HP. It's pretty low actually, but you have Pain Split to abuse the fact that it's so low. And then you've got 86 speed, very good for Choice Scarf, 105 special attack, hits extremely hard with Leaf Storm. Volt Switch lets this pivot, and the biggest thing is you're immune to ground. You can hit other ground types with Leaf Storm, so like this is a good answer to ground types. And you can also beat water types. So my team so far has 3 things weak to ground, 3 things weak to water. This beats both of those, so it's just the perfect match for the team. Really, any grass type would be pretty good, but this one has Levitate, so it's just fully immune to ground. Because even grass types, like when they switch in to a ground move like Earthquake, it's still going to hit decently hard. It'll take like 30-40% sometimes, whereas Rotom is just going to be completely immune, and then Water is usually a bit of a weaker type in terms of offense, so that you don't really have to worry about that as much. Of course, Ice moves are an issue, but we have Cinderace, Tyranitar, Excadrill. Like, Ice isn't really a weakness on this team. Otherwise, it's kind of nice to pair with Wish for Clefable if I want to do something with that. It's kind of cool. Gets Will-O-Wisp, that's pretty nice. Make my team a bit bulkier that way. Rotom-Mow, ton of value for 10 points on this team. I think 10 points is the right placement for it, but on this team, it's pulling its weight very hard. So I wanted another true defensive Pokemon, because so far everything is like kinda defensive. Like we have Rotom-Mow, we have Tyranitar, we have Clefable. Clefable's definitely defensive most of the time. Rotom and Tyranitar, it's like you sometimes want them to be more offensive. So I went with Slowking. Now Slowking, yes, sometimes you want it to be offensive with Nasty Plot. But most of the time, this is going to be able to send off Scalds, burn the opponent, and have Regenerator to heal it up. Teleporting with Clefable's a very good combo, and its weaknesses with Clefable pair up decently well. It resists Steel, which is not a big weakness, but you know, I mean, Rotom also resists Steel, and so does Cinderace, but Clefable and Tyranitar are both weak, so that's pretty cool. Resists Fighting for Tyranitar, as does Clefable. The typings on this team match up pretty well, and Slowking is also a way to kill poison types. Not that we don't have means to do that already, but it's kind of nice. And it's a water resist. Obviously it doesn't really kill water types, but at least resist them, can send off a toxic, which most bulky waters do not want to take. I mainly picked this just for the typing, the general bulk, and the pivoting of Teleport. I think it's going to be pretty valuable to this team, having something that can just sit in on pretty much everything, and then just teleport away into whatever I need. Mainly going to be stuff like Cinderace and Spectrier, because Slowking is great for like Scalding for 30%, then you teleport out, you're still alive, you regenerate a bit of health back, and you send in Cinderace or Spectrier and you finish off the kill. Or they switch to something else and then they take a big chunk. So it's pretty hard to safely play around a Slowking because it's always just going to teleport and get the initiative on you. Also can use stuff like Future Sight, make your opponent have to play around that. And it has great coverage too, just like Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, kind of the standard like Gen 1 coverage, getting every move. That's pretty nice too. Although it's a Gen 2 Pokemon, but like basically Gen 1 because it has pretty much the same moves as Slowbro. Another cool thing it gets is Counter. I've run that before. It's pretty good. And I have Slowking on my NPBA team, so pretty nice to have them on both. I don't generally like to draft the same teams, but I've gotten to the point where I've done so many drafts that I'm pretty much past like trying to get variety. But this is my only like shared pick between teams, so it's one I'm very happy with. Very versatile in its defensive roles, and it can sometimes be a nasty plot or a weakness policy set. So a lot of options here for Slowking. Lastly, before I move on, I had a couple weaknesses on this team. The biggest one was hazard removal. Now I have Rotom-Mow, but sometimes Rotom wants to be scarfed. Sometimes it just doesn't want to have to run Defog. It wants to run like Will-O-Wisp Pain Split and then 2 attacks instead of Defog. That's going to happen sometimes. And then Excadrill, obviously we can't rely on that to be our rapid spinner because it's not really bulky enough. Even though it's a pretty good spinner, a lot of times, it's just going to be Scarfed, it's going to be like Banded or something, or I just can't fit it on. I need like a coverage move and Swords Dance for it to be good. So for one more defogger, I went with maybe a less traditional one, but I decided to go for Salamence. So Salamence at 13 points, I thought was a pretty good deal. Maybe 1.5 points under where I value it. I value it around the 14 to 15 range. But it's a very scary Pokemon. Of course, being a pseudo-legend like Tyranitar, it has insane stats. It gets me that 100 speed tier, which I was really missing because my speed tiers before were like kind of bad, but now that I have Salamence, they're pretty good. It has 2 very good abilities. It's a great setup sweeper with Dragon Dance, and then you have Moxie to continue the sweep. So it's kind of similar to like Spectrier in that regard, just on the physical side with way better coverage. The downside being obviously it's way less fast. You do need to use that Dragon Dance before you can really start a sweep. It has good special attack and physical attack. Both sets are very viable. Its special coverage is actually great. You get Hydro Pump, Flamethrower, I think Thunderbolt. You don't get Ice Beam. And then on the physical side, you got Dual Wing Beat, you got Earthquake, you got like Dragon Claw Outrage, kind of the standard stuff. And if you want to be more defensive, you got Roost, you got Defog, you can run Wish even. I don't know what Wish is compatible with because I know it's like kind of it's like an event move or something. It might be compatible with everything, I'm just not sure. But Wish, Salamence, definitely want to run that sometime. Unfortunately, it does not get U-turn or anything like that. It doesn't even get Baton Pass, but you can live with that. It's also very nice because it gives me another ground immunity. And its weaknesses aren't really shared on this team. Like, it's weak to Fairy, same as Tyranitar, but we have, like, Cinderace and Excadrill, so I'm not too scared about that. Weak to Ice, we got Slowbro, or Slowking. Obviously, Rotom's also weak to Ice, but we got Tyranitar, Excadrill to hit them. Cinderace hits Ice. Rock is only shared with Cinderace, where we have, obviously, Excadrill to beat that. I'm trying to think what else is weak to, I guess, Dragon, and we have Clefable and Excadrill, so pretty much every weakness is covered, and I think it's covered quite well. So Salamence, again, it's going to be similar to Spectrier as like a late game cleaner sometimes, but it also has the utility option of that defog set I was mentioning. So I really like the versatility, and for that point value, it felt like a great pick for me. The other thing I was considering was Dragonite, which can do similar things, but I might prefer Salamence. Obviously, Dragonite has the better ability, but Dragonite does not work on sand teams because it multi-scale gets broken, so there's nothing you can do about that. It wasn't really viable for this team. Though I could see some free agent transactions that might be involving Dragonite or a different dragon. I will admit fully, I have 2 more picks after this, but I might end up changing up this team a bit in free agency, but I want to see how it does. I really like that sand core, having some sweeping potential. This team's pretty much all about like setup sweep. either with Sand, with Nasty Plot, with Dragon Dance, or even with Calm Mind Clefable. Now, of course, I have 2 more picks, because this is only 8 Pokemon, and it's 9 to 11, so gotta have at least 1 more, but I ended up going with 2 more. And first off, I went with Vigoroth. So, Vigoroth for 1 point, gets me out of my last point. I only have 1 point after this. But this is a very bulky Pokemon for, like, considering how quote-unquote bad it is. It has a lot of defense for an Eviolite user. 80 HP, 80 defense is very bulky. Obviously, on the special side, it's not good. It's not terrible, but it's pretty questionable at best. But you've got a great moveset with this thing. It has all like those quote-unquote Gen 1 normal type moves. You got Thunderbolt, you got Flamethrower, which can be useful in the rare matchups where like you need a 4 times effective move. Even though special attack's low, you can invest, you can just like, you know, accept the 2-hit KO. And also you're going to get Slack off, making this even bulkier. It's a great toxic user. It's a counter to a couple things like Mega Mawile. You can run this thing bulky and actually beat Mega Mawile sometimes. There's a couple other like random things that if they don't really have a good fighting move, defensive Vigoroth actually wins certain 1v1 matchups. That's pretty funny. I don't know how often I'll bring it. I might bring it like 1 time. It's not good, I won't lie, but for a 1-pointer, this thing's super bulky with Eviolite on the defensive side, and it has 90 speed, which is like good to have that in a speed tier. People might try to outspeed this instead of the Excadrill, giving me a couple extra EVs of like leeway in terms of like damage rolls and stuff like that. So pretty happy about this pick. And the last pick, I will fully admit I am not happy about taking. So I wanted Charjabug, my boy, the Charjabug. But it was sniped. It was sniped kind of early, actually. It was taken in like round 8. And I really wanted it. It's actually a really good Pokemon. It's very bulky. It's a bad typing, but not even that bad of a typing, for being honest. It's only weak to like 2 things. Fire and Rock, I think. And maybe like 1 other thing I can't think of. Yeah, it's just Fire and Rock. So I didn't get it. That's the point. It has sticky webs. I really wanted webs because they are just good in general. And I wanted the, you know, the old mascot of my previous team. But I was sniped, couldn't get it, so I went with Grubbin. But somebody messaged me and was like, hey, you should draft Emolga, because Emolga, which I took, is drafted in every division. And there, it was like, it'd be really funny if everyone had drafted Emolga, because Attack was the only division that didn't draft it. And I was like, I was thinking about it, because I did actually want to run Grubbin, and I probably would never use it. I was like, Emolga's actually not that bad for 1 point. It has very good speed, it can paralyze things, it can be an electric immunity. For one, honestly, Emolga should probably be like 2 points, because it's not bad. Volt switches, does stuff. But am I ever bringing it on this team? Probably not. That's fine. So Emolga's the funny final pick. Nothing wrong with that. You may see it 1 week. It's not terrible, but that's Emolga. So I'll go to my final team in this Ballhawks document. And it's looking pretty solid. A bit of a rock weakness, but also don't forget the fact that Emolga doesn't count as a rock weakness because I'm never bringing it. Same with ice. Like, yes, I technically have 3 things weak to ice and only 2 resistances, but I'm not bringing Emolga. So, like, don't consider that rock and ice weakness to be that bad. Of course, a little bit more of a resistance to rock would be nice. And I do recognize I definitely have a ground and a water weakness. And that's not ideal, but I have some immunities, and then water I have some resistances, so I did my best to patch those up. Obviously, when you're running a sand core, you're gonna have water weaknesses and ground weaknesses. There's no way around it. And then Cinderace being on the same team doesn't exactly pair perfectly, but I think they end up pairing offensively decently well. Cinderace is very hard to check because its coverage is big enough that like There's no single Pokemon that just like walls it completely. Fire, Poison, Steel, Fighting, Dark coverage is like, it's so widespread, and since it has Libero, like even Sucker Punch is gonna hurt some things. Even like Iron Head, if they have like a rock type. Although if they have like, I don't know, a rock type that isn't weak to fighting, I can't even think of what that would be. Like Armaldo, I guess, I would run Iron Head for. Speaking of Armaldo, this team's kind of weak to Armaldo. Anyway, stuff like that. So the coverage is very good on Cinderace, that it makes it hard to check. And then Bulk Up makes it a threat, so you can't just ignore it. Overall, like, setup is a huge theme for me. And I think the team is strong in the hazard game. I've got 3 Rock Setters. I would like to have, honestly, like a Spike or a Toxic Spike or a Web Setter. I think that would be pretty nice for this team. But my Defog and my Rapid Spin is good. 2 Defoggers that are both pretty solid and a Rapid Spinner that's pretty solid. Got pretty okay pivoting. Volt Switch on the Rotom. I could run U-Turn on the Cinderace if I want to go Blaze. And then 2 Teleport users I'm really happy about. Otherwise, we got some clerical stuff going on with Clefable and the Salamence. And ignore the Trick Room. I'm just looking at the moves on the right side. I'm not using Trick Room, but maybe I will one time. The speed tiers for this team, another big strength. They're pretty much perfect. Not much to say about that. They line up almost perfectly. Only thing I'm missing is something like between 86 and 61, I guess, but most of the time below 80, people stop running speed, so I'm not too concerned about that. So yeah, this team is going to be interesting. I will probably make an update video if I end up doing free agent transactions, because somebody has suggested some to me that look kind of good, but I won't reveal them because I don't want to get sniped. So, with that said, this was a weird video to record. I know I rambled quite a bit, as I do. It's pretty hard to not ramble in a team builder, especially when I never write scripts or anything like that. So, if you stuck with it for the 30 minutes that it took, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in week 1 in a few days. See you later. Bye.